Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Moscow City Board of Adjustments for August 22nd, 2017. And with that, let's start with the approval of minutes from the last meeting.
I didn't see any corrections, and therefore I'd move approval of the minutes of July 18, 2017.
I didn't see any Scribners either. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Sustained?
I abstain.
Or abstained, excuse me. It is approved. There is 4 ayes, no nays, and 1 abstention. And that gets us to the public hearing. To come up and present this to us. Jerry would like to make a comment prior to that.
Yeah, thanks. It's because I work for the university, and this is actually both a public disclosure and a request for the board, actually combined. Because I work for the university, issue is raised both by city staff and city attorney about the potential conflict of interest, a potential conflict of interest, and because violation or knowingly acting on a matter in which you have a conflict of interest is a misdemeanor, I chose to be a bit cautious about it and sought advice both from the State Attorney General's office and then from University Counsel, both of whom determined because I have absolutely no connection to the program that will take advantage of this, will receive no individual benefit in any way, and will only benefit individually to the same extent the tangential benefit of whatever general university employees might benefit from this, that there's no there's no conflict of interest, excuse me. So I feel comfortable participating, but I want to give the board the opportunity to opine on the matter if they chose to.
We don't want you to go home, Jerry.
Okay.
I don't think.
All right, so I'm given the AG's advice, I'm perfectly comfortable participating in the meeting. I don't think there's a conflict. I never thought there was a conflict, but I also don't want to go to jail.
I appreciate your candor.
Thanks.
Does anybody have an issue? Jerry?
No, I don't want you to go to jail either.
Fair enough.
Thanks, Marshall.
All right. Ryan, take it away.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everybody, Board of Adjustments, and members of the public. I'd like to thank you to the Conditional Use Permit that you're here to sit and adjudicate for tonight. And tonight's the CUP application to develop an education institution located in the Central Business Zoning District in order to develop a medical education program with classroom capabilities of 40 students and 5 faculty and staff. Conditional use permit is within the central business zone, and commercial schools and educational institutions with specific consideration given to traffic, parking, safety, and nuisance issues, as well as the cumulative impacts of and proximity to existing commercial schools and educational institutions in the vicinity and the impact on availability of retail and office space. Moscow City Code 4-3-5, Delta 8. So the proposed education institution is on the 3rd floor of Gritman MOB at 803 South Main Street. Standard class times are 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and it is the request of the applicant to include student access after hours. The proposal is up to 40 students and combined faculty and staff of up to 5. The existing WWAMI program includes a total of 80 students who are currently enrolled, and the site's split with the proposed location and the additional location of the WWAMI program building on campus at the Southwest Highway of 95 and Sweet Avenue, which is the former business incubator. The proposed space is a 40-person classroom. It also has 4 faculty offices, an 8-person conference room, common room for study or student support, anatomy lab with an adjoining pro-section room, locker rooms with showers, and there also is a request for additional operations or anticipation for additional operations. The applicant anticipates the classroom will be utilized over the academic year for occasional WWAMI events, programs, and guest speakers from the community. So as you can see, this is the subject property looking from the northeast corner to the southwest. A little bit of background about the site. The total area of the parcel is 30,095 square feet. The total building floor space is 56,000 square feet, and the total area of the proposed space is 8,230 feet. The total first floor commercial frontage on South Main Street is 223 feet. And that is taken from the eastern property line as well as the slight jog to the southwest, right along Main Street. So the previous uses included agricultural silos with a rail easement until 2006-2007. This is aerial imagery of the existing site at that time. It was then purchased and developed by Medical Gritman Park, and it was developed into a site with 13 parking spaces, ADA compliant sidewalks and approaches. They also reconfigured the public parking to 45-degree stalls and constructed new streetscape improvements along Main Street. As you can see here, they did include floor plans. The educational institution occurs exclusively on the eastern half of the third floor. There's no commercial frontage on Main Street. Again, this is the main floor as it stands from the included application. And the parking lot is not required, again, within the central business district. Here you can see the third floor plans, and we have a little bit of a closer view of that. So again, you can see the anatomy lab, and then the women's and men's locker room, the pro section room, and then the existing staircase and shared hallway. The common space where the students have student lounge, as well as conference tables, and conference and office spaces, elevators, and the classroom area. So now we've gone over some of the floor plans. We'll go into zoning. Located within the central business zoning district, and all surrounding properties are located outside the central business zone. As you can see here on the map, the area highlighted in red are the two parcels that we are talking about today. It is central business. And to the north, we have industrial zones where there is a tire repair shop. We also have parcels to the east and southwest, which are general business. Traditionally, most of these are Gritman or offices supported by Gritman Medical. And the parcels to the south and west are urban mixed commercial. We also have Kreitz Seed to the southwest. And further to the southwest, you can see the university zone districts. The surrounding land uses, we have primary, oops, go back there, pardon me. So the surrounding land uses, we have primarily medical office. We also have Jackson Street near College Avenue is the University of Idaho Art and Architecture East building. It's directly next to the subject property box. And then we also have Lot 60, which is the 333 space parking area to the southwest of the property. Directly across the street from the property is Kreitz Seeds Research Greenhouse. And then within that lot 60 with the 333 stalls is the Moscow Intermodal Transportation Center. And again, as with the applicant, the information that was provided, 73% of the average occupancy owned, or 73% of those parking stalls are on average occupancy and is owned and managed by the University of Idaho. So the building uses, these are the facilities that and the businesses located within the building. We have the Chaz Leta Community Health on the first floor. We have Gritman's Cardiac Rehab, Nutrition, and Diabetes Center, Gritman's Oncology Center, and with the request, we would have WWAMI on the third floor. Looking at the access to the off-street parking is from 8th Street. We also have the pedestrian access from the building, primarily coming from the east. And southwest of the subject property is Kreitz Seeds Research Greenhouse. And foot traffic from the University of Idaho campus would likely come from the crosswalk at College and Jackson Street. So as this relates to our comprehensive plan, Chapter 2 states that land use and community character designates the subject property as urban commercial. The urban commercial designation is intended to provide for the most intensive mix of commercial and residential uses, especially in the pedestrian-oriented manner. This is appropriately applied within the city's downtown urban core and the immediate surrounding area as deemed appropriate. Chapter 3 talks about community mobility and identifies Main Street as a collector street. In Chapter 6.5, Economic Development Strategy states the University of Idaho should be viewed as an asset to the university, or it shall be viewed as an asset and utilized in support for betterment of local and regional economy. Other considerations, again, part of the city code as specified within the educational institution lists lists educational institutions as a conditionally permitted use. That also says that we have to apply specific considerations given to traffic, parking, safety, and nuisance issues, even though parking is not required within the central business zone. We also have to look at the cumulative impacts of and proximity to existing schools, commercial schools, and education institutions in the vicinity, and the impact on the availability of retail and office space, especially at the street level. So let's go into a little bit further detail for the traffic. Subject property is located near the intersection of Main and Jackson Streets. It's adjacent to the west and South Jackson, which contains 3 one-way southbound lanes and is designated as Highway 95. 8th Street is adjacent to the north and serves the only means of vehicular access to off-street parking. The most recent traffic counts near the subject property were recorded on Jackson Street between 6th and 8th Streets in 2016 and averaged 10,750 vehicles per day. Again, utilizing the same transportation engineer's trip generation manual as through the previous CUP, we factor in the generated 2.38 trips per day per student, and then we also look at the 0.21 trips per student during both AM and PM peak hours, which would allow us to view the maximum proposed student enrollment with an estimated vehicle volume of 190 vehicle trips per day, or 40 vehicle trips during the AM and PM peak hours. Parking. The off-street parking schedule is found in Title IV, Chapter 6.5 of Moscow City Code, and states that it does not apply to properties located within the central business zone. The University of Idaho has indicated that there are 333 parking stalls with 73% average occupancy rate available to the U of I students and faculty who possess a valid parking permit in Lot 60, which is 660 feet from the subject property. There are a total of 223 on-street public parking spaces within 600 feet of the subject property. The regulations vary, and while some areas are restricted to 3-hour parking between 8 to 5 p.m., and other areas are prohibiting parking between the hours of 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. The regulated downtown parking permit illustrates the various parking regulations on the street parking areas in the vicinity of the subject property. And staff with the engineering department conducted a parking utilization assessment over a 5-day period from August 7th through August 11th to assess the average availability of public on-street parking spaces located within 600 feet of the subject property. So again, here we have the downtown regulated parking zone, and to the far right, which is the far south of the map, we see that along Main Street, the area indicated in a dash purple, 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., no parking zones are the only areas within the restricted parking areas. So here's a closer look at our downtown parking study. The area indicated in red identifies the boundary of the parking assessment and the streets that we did and conducted the inventory of. The areas that have the indications with lettering above, as well as the white circles on the map. I know the members of the audience have a hard time seeing it, but the application and the staff report actually includes a little bit of clearer detail. Each area locates between the total available stalls within that area of study. The areas indicated in blue show the public parking spots, and the areas indicated in a dark red indicate private parking. So here's our parking study results. After a closer look, we see that between Monday through Friday, we had a little bit of a varying degree of parking assessment. One rule to note: on Monday, the very first day of the survey, at 9 a.m., our engineering department was overtasked with conducting other activities within the city on their other 60 projects, so they weren't able to conduct the assessment until 12:30 and at 2. But overall, the overall average available spots within those 233 include 30.62 overall average availability. And we'll go into a little bit further detail up here. So again, the parking counts were taken at 9 a.m., 12:30, and 2, Monday through Friday. During the assessment periods, the average parking availability at 9 a.m. was 79 stalls, or 36% of the 223. Available parking spaces at 12:30 were 66 stalls, which is 30% of the 233 spaces. And the average spaces at 2 p.m. were 62 spaces, or 28% of the 223 spaces.
So, Ryan,
Yes.
clarification on this: these numbers are stalls available at that time.
Correct. And again, so with the parking considerations, off-street parking requirements for education institutions outside of the central business zone, we have 1 parking space for every faculty or staff member and 1 parking space for every 5 students. And again, this is going, if this was outside of the central business zone, to allow us to have a little bit of an intake on how we would project the overall impact within that area. the off-street parking requirement for the proposed use and the proposed maximum occupancy of 40 students and 5 faculty would be 13 total spaces. And again, the historical analysis for similar education institutions within the Central Business District focused on the mitigation of the additional parking demand upon the downtown public parking system that an educational institution may impose, beyond which is reasonably anticipated to be demanded or other uses are identified as permitted principal uses within the Central Business District. Again, parking considerations with regard to the proposed 8,230 square foot education institution at 803 South Main Street. Staff explored 3 different parking demand scenarios that would likely result from the common permitted uses within the Central Business District. Number 1, medical and dental clinic use. The parking requirement outside of Central Business Zone would require 1 space per 200 square feet, which would result in a total of 41 spaces, which also have primarily a daytime demand use. Professional office conversion outside of Central Business Zone would be 1 space per 400 square feet, requiring a total of 21 spaces, which would have a large daytime use demand with mixed evening demand. And a mixture of 50-50 of retail and medical office use would be the average of those two, which would require 31 spaces, mainly daytime demand, with some evening demand possible. So again, looking further into considerations, in consideration of the stated intent and purpose of the CB district and the current majority of the use surrounding the site, it is reasonable to say that the first scenario would most closely represent the anticipated area use and resulting off-street parking demand that is anticipated to occur within the CB district at this current location. When compared to the parking demand of the proposed education institution, it appears the proposed education institution could have a reduced impact of off-street parking demand by 28 spaces than that of scenario 1, which would be 41 spaces that would likely be considered for mitigation. Again, this is looking into 41 spaces required for medical use minus the 13 total required for educational institution, would theoretically could have a 28 space reduction in demand by the change of use from medical to educational use. Safety and nuisance considerations. Again, the code requires us to look into these further. The current property is served by fully improved streets, sidewalks, and marked crosswalks on all adjacent and surrounding intersections completed in 2017. There's no specific safety concerns that have been identified by Public Works, police, or the fire departments, and the proposed construction would not generate nuisances detrimental to the neighborhood and impacts of any smells, sounds, chemicals, or contaminants, which would be wholly contained within the site. The city code also directs that the board assess the cumulative impacts in proximity to schools, commercial schools, and educational institutions in the vicinity of the educational institution. While the code does not define the distance to be considered within the vicinity of the proposed use, the staff has identified existing schools and educational institutions and their distance to the proposed use as listed below and identified on the map. Here we have, again, this is a map looking at the nearby educational institutions. Here we have the closest institution is the U of I Art and Architecture East Building and Lot 60, which is 660 feet southwest of the subject property. We have New St. Andrews College at South Main. That's 1,210 feet north of the subject property. We have included the parking lots across the street from the Jackson Street parking identified on the map. And we also have Moscow Senior High School, which is 1,463 feet northeast of the subject property. Plus Prairie Charter School, which is 1,997 feet south of the subject property, and West Park Elementary, 2,164 feet west of the subject property. Finally, we have Russell Elementary, which is 2,247 feet northeast of the subject property. Again, impacts on the availability of retail and office space, especially at the street level. City Code directs that consideration be given to the impact of educational institutions upon the availability of retail and office space, especially at street level. The subject building currently has Chase Medical Clinic which occupies the first floor. The proposed use would not displace any active retail or office use, as the educational institution would occupy a portion of the third floor. And while the portion or the proposed use does not displace any active retail or office use, it would preclude the potential opportunity for retail or office use of the third floor. Because the subject property is on the third floor, the potential impact on the street level commercial frontage would likely be negligible. Total available street level commercial frontage in the central business zone, excluding the existing parking lots, is 18,246 linear feet. The parcel's main floor commercial frontage represents 220 linear feet, or 1.2% of the total potential street level commercial frontage in the downtown area. The total private developable land contained within central business, including parking lots used for existing educational institutions, totals 1,263,686 square feet. And I know this is brought up at the previous CUP hearing in regards to being able to quantify this, but again, this is the most simplistic way to assess the land, even though we may have multiple stories of commercial use. We're looking strictly at the parcel size. And again, the existing land area dedicated to school and educational institution in the CB district includes 20,784 square feet of parking lots tied to existing educational use. It's currently 48,934 square feet, or 3.9% of the total CB district developable land area. And the subject property is 8,230 square feet, and when added to the existing school, daycare, and educational uses, the total land area dedicated to such uses would be 57,164 square feet, or 4.5% of the total CB parcel area.
Ryan, can I ask a clarification on that?
Yes, sir.
So the total, the 1.26 million square feet, that is just parcel size, you said,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But the 57,000 square feet includes multiple levels?
For this one, it does.
Okay, so
Again,
we have to reduce that 4.5% by some number,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yeah. Again, it's hard to have a tangible evidence on this until we do a full inventory of every single story of the commercial frontage. And even then, beyond the overall use, we have to look at how the floor space is laid out as well. So occupiable space versus actual office space varies depending on assembly areas and multiple other components of International Building Code.
But in the context of this particular application, the application does not take away any of the 8,230 square feet available for commercial or office space on the ground floor.
Correct.
Okay. So it could also be perceived as having a 0%.
Yes.
Impact.
0% impact.
Okay.
Yeah. It
Thank
can be interpreted that way. All right. So the conditional use recommendation, the staff recommends approval of the proposed conditional use permit at 803 South Main Street for an educational institution with no conditions. Again, the conditions of approval, the Board of Adjustment may impose conditions including but not limited to minimizing the adverse effect on other development, controlling the sequence and timing of the development, controlling the duration of the development, assuring that the development is maintained properly, designate the exact location and nature of the development, requiring the provision for on-site or off-site public parking facilities or services, requiring more restrictive standards than those so generally required in an ordinance, or requiring a mitigation of effects for the proposed development upon service delivery by any political subdivision, including school districts providing services within the planned jurisdictions. Any questions from the board?
Go ahead, Marshall.
Yeah, Ryan, I realize it probably won't affect any decision tonight, but is the Transportation Commission currently or in the future starting to look at the parking regulations in the downtown area, including the central business district?
I have heard the Public Works Director on record discussing looking at the overall parking requirement within downtown. I don't know what it pertains to, but I know that he's come on record saying that this would, because of the issues that are bringing forth, it would be a good opportunity to have those discussions while they're at the forefront of the community's mind. But I don't know.
You don't know the extent of what they're going to look at?
I don't know.
You might, by any chance?
Well, as I recall, I think in 2009, Transportation Commission developed a steering committee or a subcommittee to come up with recommendations for, to resolve some issues with maybe perceived issues with downtown parking. And I believe they came up with a number of recommendations, and I don't know that those have been implemented. So they do, have those recommendations from 2009. They could pick those up again and start looking at implementing some of those. But as I understand it, I don't know that they're going to do that.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Another one, Joe?
Yes.
Yeah, Ryan, after the building was complete, was there any parking displaced off of 8th Street or Main Street or reconfigured?
Yes, so the 8th Street and Main Street were reconfigured all the way to College Ave, or Railroad Avenue. And so there was a reconfiguration of those parking stalls. They did maintain parallel parking to the north of the property on the south side of 8th Street, but along Main Street they reconfigured all those parking stalls to 45-degree stalls, which essentially increased the overall availability of parking within there by
You said it did increase?
Yes, it did.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ryan.
Jerry?
These are primarily clarifications, but I want to make sure that this is clear. Your estimates of parking demand of this project compared to parking demand generated by potential permitted uses in the district is that this proposal would have less of an impact or demand less public parking spaces than any other potential permitted use.
Not for all potential permitted use, but if we look at the potential for retail, or correction, for medical or dental, like all the rest of the offices within the surrounding areas, that has one of the highest parking demands at 1 per 200 square feet outside of central business. And if we apply the 40 potential students as well as the 5 faculty and staff, that would essentially have a reduced impact on the parking if the educational institution took that
Okay.
position instead
Well,
of
so
the medical office.
the estimate based on the non-central business district parking demands are 13 spaces, that's right?
Mhm.
And then your so these 3 obviously aren't the full range of permitted uses in the district, but they're 41, 21, and 31,
Correct.
which are all greater than 13.
Correct.
I know I'm a law professor, but I think my math's right there. But are there other permitted uses in the district that would have a lowered parking demand?
1 to 400 is typically the lowest parking demand within any kind of traditional business or restaurant. So that's usually the lowest parking demand within a business setting.
Okay, and that would be 21 spaces.
Correct.
Yeah, you could presumably have a office without any on-site customer service, and that'd be 1 per 800. So a lot of the offices that, somebody's just working from a computer, doesn't actually have customers coming up to the location, you could see 1 per 800. 1 per 200 is about as highest as we generally go with the parking table, and that's usually generates the highest demand, and that would be the medical,
Okay.
medical office use that would be similar to the surrounding uses of that area.
And 1 per 800 would be about 11 spaces.
Yeah.
So the lowest demand would be 2 fewer than this proposal, but all the rest are quite a
Yeah.
bit higher.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as it relates to central business too, that's another important component to take in mind as well, as far as the scope of businesses that central business encourages.
All of which would likely be a higher parking demand.
Yes.
Right. So then my second question, we have this memo from staff engineer, and as I interpret this is an assessment of any development at this site. It's not specific to this development. Right?
Correct.
So any development, this is kind of obvious, is going to increase parking demand. That's the nature of this. Okay. Thanks.
You bet.
Well, that just addressed one of my questions. The second is that building actually complete?
It is.
And is it fully occupied?
No, it's not. No, they've got a couple spaces open within that building. The third floor, maybe the applicant can have a little bit more of a scope on occupancy, but I do know that there are some open spaces within there. But we can have the applicant possibly fill you in.
I actually would like the applicant to address that because our parking is based on the current load, and if that building's not full, then we don't know what the true extent of parking in that area would be.
You mean the parking study that was done is based potentially on an
based
empty
on-
building?
Pretty much.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Any other questions for staff? Thanks, Ryan.
Okay.
With that, I'd like to open up the hearing for public opinion. Would the applicant please come up and tell us about your project? You can even take turns if you'd like.
All right. Hello. I am Kara Besson, the CEO of Gritman Medical Center and part of Gritman Medical Park. So to answer your question, as far as the building, there is about 15,000 square feet of shell space still in the building to be occupied. One thing that was not discussed in here is across the street, we have some property south of the building, and we are actually developing some more parking that's going to have about 33 spaces in there, plus a gravel lot for construction during this project.
Okay.
And that's adjacent to the building?
It's across Jackson.
It's across Jackson.
Yeah, south.
Any other questions for? Thank you.
Well, I have
Well,
a couple
go
questions.
ahead.
Actually. So you're under some kind of conditional lease with the university, presumably, if you get the CUP. Do you have any other ideas as to what might fill the rest of the space?
The plans for the building is medical or medical education. So we do not have any plans as of yet. It's about probably a 3-year plan to fill the rest of the building.
I have a question, Kara.
Yes.
You talked about current WWAMI enrollment of 40 medical students per year at a different location here in Moscow. I'm going to take that to be not in Seattle, but here in Moscow. And so it says that resulting in 80 medical educational students and in the WWAMI program, I'm taking it.
Correct. And I'm actually going to have Jeff come up here and talk about the WWAMI program.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and our members of the Board of Adjustment. I have just a few comments, if that's all right, and then I'd be happy to answer some of those questions related to the growth and the size. My name is Jeff Segmiller, and I'm the director of the WWAMI program. And we have been, the WWAMI program has been here in Moscow for 45 years. We are proud for that, for this history and tradition. We are the site for the entire state of Idaho to produce public-supported medical education and physicians for our state. For 45 years we have done that. 15% of physicians in the state of Idaho are WWAMI graduates. It is impossible for us to produce a physician without our public support partners, without hospitals. We need that to exist, to survive. And for 45 years, we have partnered with all of the regional hospitals in this area, and one of the key partners has been Gritman Hospital. We're excited about the potential and the growth. To kind of get towards your question, for many years the program started with 20 students, 20 Idaho residents. They have to be an Idaho resident to get into the program. It's supported by the state. The students also pay tuition. And at the time when it started in 1972, there were students from Washington and students from Idaho that would actually take classes together and then bounce back and forth weekly or day by day to WSU's campus and the University of Idaho's campus. They would spend 1 year on our campus, and then they would go spend their second year in Seattle. And then they would come back and do years 3 and 4 in the state or anywhere within the WWAMI region. WWAMI stands for Washington, Wyoming, Alaska, Montana, and Idaho, which are all of the partner states that deliver medical education through the University of Washington School of Medicine. A few years ago, the state met to decide the plan and future of medical education for the state. In 2008, a committee was formed by the governor to assess the need for increasing or growing medical education in the state. And the decision was to set out a plan to start growing the number of spots for medical students in Idaho. And the goal was set at 40 students and 10 students that also attend the University of Utah. So we would have a total of 50 residents training to become physicians. During that time, the University of Washington went through a curriculum renewal process, And part of that curriculum renewal process was that there was a desire to combine the first 2 years of medical school into an 18-month curriculum that had the basic sciences and an introduction to clinical training. And so we were growing our class size to 40, and then once the new curriculum was in place, it then made it so that we had second-year students on our campus. So now we're at the point where we have 40 first-year students and 40 second-year students in Moscow, Idaho. And that's how we get to the number where we're at. With the growth of the number of medical students in Idaho, in our region, we basically quadrupled. We went from 20, and actually the state had funding challenges, and it actually went down, and it took 20 years, went down to 13, and it took 20 years to get back up to 20 students. I can just tell you, this program is so important to the state, and it is our public-supported medical school. The challenge with it is that we are 49th out of 50 states for number of physicians per capita. So we need programs like this to grow. The number of students, the increasing the class size and the second year being on our campus is a great thing for Idaho. We now have the capability to have our students spend a majority of their 4 years in the state of Idaho. The longer they spend their medical education experience in a region, the more likely they will come back and practice in those states. And I could go through a list of physicians that work in our region that have come back, that are WWAMI graduates, that are our physicians today in our community. This site to us is very important. We're already, I guess what the study, maybe I appreciate the study, but what the study doesn't really account for is these students are already here. They're already here in our community. They're already parking on the University of Idaho campus. They're utilizing what was the business incubator building. Unfortunately, we send our students back over to WSU right now for their anatomy experience. And I would like to keep an Idaho resident in Idaho as much as we can so that they'll come back and practice in our state. We have an amazing return on investment. 51% of our graduates will return and practice in the state of Idaho, and the national average is 39%. So we exceed that by a long shot. And I think part of that is because we offer such a rich community experience for our medical students. So I'm excited for this program. I'm looking forward to the Board of Adjustment weighing in on this, and I'm glad that there's a forum that this can be discussed. I think the importance of a program like this often doesn't really carry the weight or the magnitude that it should. In fact, the WWAMI program is kind of unheard of sometimes. We don't really understand the impact that it has to the state, and that's kind of why I'm here on behalf of Gritman Hospital to kind of give that context of the program. And so those are my comments, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So we've had a number of educational institutional hearings in the past little bit, and some of the issues have been regarding economic impact of the activity. And so I have a number of what seem to be, might be annoyingly specific questions, but maybe the university representative is better equipped to answer these, and that's fine. But first, so you mentioned that we have to send students to Wazoo, Washington State, to conduct part of their education. Does that mean that the University of the State of Idaho is paying Washington State University to provide those services, and is that funding that would then be able to stay within the state if we provide the services here?
So that's exactly right. What has happened over the years, as Wazoo moved their students up to Spokane, and then WWAMI kind of split off and WSU started their own medical school, there was an agreement was set in place so that we could continue utilizing the facilities as we transitioned. And so resources that we put into maintaining individuals for those facilities over there, supplies for those facilities, and things that benefit the programs over there will be able to be utilized over here.
And so WWAMI as I understand, is an entirely separate program, independent to some extent from the university operations, and directly created by the legislature, and the appropriation comes independently from the legislature. Is that accurate?
It's a special programs, but it is run through the University of Idaho. And
we have 40 students, 40 per cohort per year currently. So, apologize for a multi-part question. Have we always been able to fill that allocation? And if we can't, if, for example, the opportunity were not available in Moscow to do so, do you have any sense of what would happen to that funding? Would the legislature reduce it, or would it be sent somewhere else?
There's never been a challenge in filling in any medical school the number of seats that are available. There are 7,900 applicants to the University of Washington School of Medicine. There's, on average, in the state of Idaho, around 160 to 175 applicants a year for 40 spots.
And this is reading political crystal balls to some extent, but I've heard discussion about increasing the number of seats available in WWAMI. Do you have any sense of whether that's possible? Or are you trying to make it happen?
I can answer this, that it took us 45 years to grow it, and we're 49th out of 50 states for number of physicians per capita. We cannot go another 45 years and not grow it. So strategically, our state needs to really take that seriously. It's the whole pipeline of medical education that I really didn't talk about. The 4 years of medical school is only a small piece of everything that needs to grow. You need to grow undergraduate medical education, which is what we do for the 4 years of medical school. But you also have to grow graduate medical education and the clinical opportunities within our state. And we have a shortage of all of that.
So then, I think this is the last thing I have. And I know this is sort of fantasy, so I apologize for that, but if somehow the state of Idaho suddenly got very generous with its money and increased the number of seats to 50 or 60, assuming Washington allowed that, is there the capacity in this proposal to handle additional students?
So that's a really good question, and I would answer probably towing the line on this. I'm in the fantasy world right now, that if the state decided we wanted to grow it from 40 to 50, 50 to 80 or whatever it is, that there is capacity for growth in these facilities. There's all kinds of options, whether you stagger the classroom meeting times or whether you have more students per station when you're teaching and things like that. So there's a variety of mechanisms for that. But the number one factor, there's probably two factors that really limit your ability to grow, and that's the licensing, the board that accredits medical schools. Really limits your ability to grow without it being sustainable. And part of the bottleneck for making it sustainable is really the clerkship opportunities in the state. And so those are the clinical experiences in pediatrics or orthopedics or you name the area, family medicine, that the students have to have required rotations throughout the state. And that's really a bigger question about, the state could say, we want to increase the number of students in your cohort. The bigger question is, we need to get not only Gritman, but St. Luke's, St. Al's, and Boise, and throughout the entire state, Kootenai, to really buy into the fact that that medical education is a key part of our healthcare environment.
So to put a kind of point on that, absent a specific legislative act that increases the number of students in this program, you will stay at 40 per cohort.
It has to be a state. We can't just open the doors.
Okay.
I have to go through the State Board of Education, Joint Finance Appropriations Committee, the governor, So and the University of Idaho and the University of Washington. So it's.
I have one final question.
Yeah.
Do you know the actual appropriation per student?
Yes. So I'll give you a ballpark figure that'll kind of help out. So the state appropriation is around $45,000 per student per year,
Okay.
and the student pays around $35,000 per student per year, and that total package, and even what the student pays, is below the national average for the cost of public supported medical school.
What are you thinking in terms of economic impact on our community? All that money all comes.
Well, I can tell you what the economic impact is for Idaho. For every dollar we spend for medical education in WWAMI, $5.10 comes back to the state. We did an economic impact study just last year. We usually do that about every 5 to 10 years.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
That's it.
Sure.
I'm
Okay.
almost positive.
By the way, the
questions?
national average is like $3 for every dollar spent. So we get a good bang for our buck.
Jerry didn't take all my questions. I have one that's actually more of a clarification. Are these WWAMI students, are they actually U of I students?
They are.
Okay.
They're dual enrolled. They are dual enrolled at the University of Washington School of Medicine and the University of Idaho. They will get their degree that says University of Washington School of Medicine in partnership with the University of Idaho, but they are, we consider them alumni. They're dual enrolled in both programs.
Okay. Any other questions for Jeff? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to open this up for any other public testimony in favor of this application. If you could come up and state your name and address. No one else wants to speak. Is there anybody who would like to speak against this application? Okay. I actually know half of you by name, but I guess I won't call you up here.
How about general testimony?
Is there any general testimony that someone would like to come up? Please come up, state your name and address in the mic, and
Excuse me. David Hall, 1334 Wallen Road, Moscow. Of course, my comments were written up before I heard what was presented here, so some of the concerns Mr. Cash, and I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, but covered. As this is my only opportunity to speak, I have to anticipate problems that might come up. And I have a few bullet points. Parking. The city says the proposed use will increase parking stress. The parking count may be flawed, as an earlier one was found to be. Plus, it was done with UI and other schools out of session. The UI blue lot is still fairly distant, about 1/8 of a mile. Will it be used, especially in bad weather? It also costs. Can some stalls be reserved for free use of WWAMI students and faculty and staff? Is the existing parking cited in the application already spoken for, given the other uses of the Gritman Medical Office building? And then I had some questions about the 80 and 40 size limit, which most were answered. Might be important whether they're full-time equivalents or multiple part-times. And the timing of the class was covered there all day. Are the students there all day, or are they on and off? That could affect traffic and parking patterns. No, didn't see that covered. Cumulative effects in the comprehensive plan. A recent remand to the Board of Adjustment on criteria 4 and 7 was done, but criterion 7 was not even mentioned at that remand hearing. So it's important to keep that in mind. We must consider cumulative effects on the new St. Andrews in the Central Business District, which is fresh today, or yesterday, I guess, for the final. There's a couple more. The correct process must be followed, such as following the open meeting law. Who can and cannot read or hear testimony? It has to be all or none for the testimony. No closed decisions in a back room. What effect might it have on the sales of alcohol? I don't think there are any bars nearby, but there are laws about the distance between bars and schools. The building is alongside a state highway. Does ITD need to be consulted on anything? And finally, the conference room is small. I finally saw that it only fits about 8, so it's certainly not a very big consideration, but said it could be used for events and programs, and was curious how many in the audience and how often, and whether daytime and evening it could affect traffic and parking issues. I didn't see that noted, and so that's all I had.
Any questions for? Thank you.
Victoria Seaver, 121 North Lily, Moscow. So I'm going general, and this looks pretty good to me. I used to work at the university, and I'm aware of how important WWAMI is. But I'm going to rely on your knowledge, my knowledge of the board's performance over the years. I don't come here often. I watch you faithfully on TV.
Oh, boy.
So I've seen everything you've done, and I pay attention. So I know you are a volunteer commission, and you have considerable expertise, experience, and you give your time to perform this valuable service. You're charged with very, very specific codes, rules, criteria, and with as much fair latitude as possible within those parameters, you do your duty here. And I observe that you have been very careful, and you are always very careful and non-capricious in how you do that. So incidentally, you have had some very difficult tasks lately, and I think it's time somebody stood up and commended you for your work and your role in this community, and I am happy to do that. So back to the proposal tonight, I am confident that you will make a judicious decision, and I will leave it to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I had any cookies, I would give you some. Would anybody else care to come up and speak? Any general comments about this conditional use? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and open it up for debate amongst the board. Who would like to start? Marshall?
Well, I'm in favor of the conditional use permit. Again, parking is one of the things that you have to consider, and it sounds like with the available public parking places, the available parking at the university, the available or the increased parking that Gritman is offering, I think parking is not an issue. I think that's taken care of and would not have an impact detrimentally on the central business district. I welcome the WWAMI students downtown, just like I welcome all students downtown, and I'm in favor of the proposal.
Okay. Any other comments? Jerry?
Yeah, I think it's important. These are kind of unique proposals. But I think it's important to always consider this type of application in the context of permitted uses downtown. So to be clear for the audience and for the few, I know a few others that religiously watch this on TV, which I always wonder about. But so permitted uses are those that would be permitted by right without any input by us or any other part of the city staff or the city government. So those happen regardless of our input. And so it's useful to compare these plans to those rather than to a no development scenario, of course, which often is what people do. Compared to a no development scenario, this is significant impact, obviously. But compared to the permitted uses that would be allowed downtown without our input, it seems like it would have a reduced impact. And of course, so that's with respect to parking and other uses. With respect to the overall impact of the downtown and the city, of course, the largest economic driver in the community is, of course, the university. I could be corrected on this, but somewhere north of $300 million total budget for the university. including all the various aspects of it. So I think as the comprehensive plan specifically indicates, it is a goal of the city to take advantage of the university, the money that comes in from throughout the state to develop the community. I think this is exactly the kind of project that we should promote. Medical education, graduate students. We're not talking about additional frats or sororities. People typically think of education, or maybe of universities. I think it's a great project. I don't see any negative impacts that would warrant denying it.
Steve, thoughts?
Well, I guess my thoughts are similar to Jerry's in the sense that Moscow is a college town, and we always are trying to get more students here because it benefits our community. And not every college on campus seems to be able to either keep it here or be able to bring in the students that are desired, and our numbers don't seem to be going up. But WWAMI students are, I think, would be considered good students to have here. They're medical students, and I think they would be well received here in the community. And so I don't see any real issues. As Marshall said, parking is kind of an issue with everything on in the downtown area, but sounds like the Whitman Medical Center is providing some more parking, and they are part of the University of Idaho campus, and it sounds like they are students, and so they have parking passes from being students and be able to use the parking facilities on campus. And some of these areas that are close by to the building are in the 3-hour parking zone, and so the hours that they listed from 7 to 5, that would preclude those people from being able to park there for that whole entire time. But there is plenty of parking on the side streets, and again, the parking that was taken, the parking study was done when the students weren't here, but that's not an area of town, I don't think, that gets too impacted by student parking in that end of town. So I don't think that the study has a tremendous impact on that building site. So I don't have a problem with the parking study that was created. I don't have a problem with it. So yeah, I think that it's a good opportunity to bring more college students in.
Marshall?
Jerry, do you have another question? I was going to make a motion.
Yeah, I do have a question. I want to be clear. Ryan, is the conditional use in its entirety in the packet anywhere? I'm looking for the language that talks about special consideration given to parking and street-level commercial and office space in the CB. I'm finding like a quote, but I'm not finding the whole thing.
I don't find the whole thing, just the list of standards on page 9.
Well, yeah, because we emphasized this in the last one, that educational institutions have the additional requirements. I want to make sure that we pay attention to them so we're not ignoring.
Yeah, let me get to the slide for you, sir. And you just wanted the special considerations?
Yeah, the actual if you have the language of the specific provision that authorizes educational institutions.
It's your very first slide, Ryan, or your second one.
Yeah, that seems right. By the way, you've upped your PowerPoint game, I noticed. I'm impressed. Good work.
Hey, it's a learning process for everybody here.
Okay, so that's the language, right? So with specific consideration given to traffic, parking, safety, and nuisance issues, as well as cumulative impacts of and proximity to existing commercial schools and educational institutions in the vicinity, impact on availability of retail and office space. So just a reminder that those are additional requirements in this specific provision over and above all other conditional uses.
Well, Chairman, I did go through the study that was done by the city for parking and taking out the areas that are 3-hour parking, and just looked at the sites that were really close by on the side streets. We were looking at, I think it was required 21 or 41 parking spots, but there are 30 spots that are readily available, and I think that wouldn't be impacted by other university students. 30 spots that are available from the study, and to me that was going to meet the number of what we were going to be required to, without the Gritman was going to be required to have spots here, even if it wasn't, if they didn't have additional parking available on across Jackson Street. But there were 30 spots here that were available that were outside the 3-hour parking area of downtown. So I felt pretty comfortable with the fact that there was parking spots that they could park there for the entire day without being impacted by the 3-hour parking.
Well, and then it was also noted that there's a potential to increase the Gritman's lot.
Exactly.
I want to say it was 33.
Yeah.
And just looking at this numerically, even with a crystal ball, if that extra 15,000 square feet was occupied and we used the 1 to 200, that'd be 75 stalls. They're adding 33. You've mentioned there's another 30. And my dilemma prior to this meeting was, how do you approve 2 institutions and add parking to one and potentially none to the other? And my response to that would be, even if we asked for more parking within a quarter-mile radius, it's U of I students, and there's a lot already there. So it just...
Exactly, yeah.
It
Well,
Taken care of.
exactly, it's covered. It's...
but on that point, recall the last one, the justification for the additional parking was that the proposed use would, and I'm not having seen the second parking study or having had the opportunity to participate in the second hearing, you'll have to forgive me, this is off, but it was an increase of about 90 parking spaces required over what permitted use would demand for that site. So we take the same, if we take the same approach, based on what Ryan gave us, we're talking about negative 20-something parking spaces required. So we could give them 7 spaces or something, right? And so I don't think that there's a issue with dissimilar treatment of 2 proposals that are otherwise similar. The parking demands are totally different.
Right. This one has 35 maybe, and or yeah.
13 was what we. I mean, it's
Right.
basically compared to the permitted use scenario. It's a negative parking demand.
And the other was 300 new students.
Right.
And so the number of students is tremendously different here.
And your analysis, Joe, too, is right. There's a huge parking lot within a quarter mile.
Right.
Well, before Marshall makes a motion, do you have any comments?
It's just, would just reiterate what everyone else
Everyone
has
else has been
already
saying?
said. Yeah,
Okay.
there's
Jerry?
plenty of parking already.
I did want to mention, since we haven't talked about it, this cumulative impacts of and proximity to existing educational institutions. Obviously, it's next door to one, almost contiguous to the one that it is, which is kind of odd because we're not authorizing a new educational institution, we're authorizing an expansion of an existing educational institution. And we have 10,000 something students across the street, and we're talking about adding, not even adding any students, as I understand it. This is just relocating existing students. And so I think the cumulative impacts are negligible, right? Other than that they will do anatomy here rather than at Washington State. But that's a negligible impact. So I wanted to make sure we had that on the record, that it does not appear to have any form of measurable cumulative impact in relation to the existing schools. At least in my assessment, I don't know.
Any comments?
And if you're making a motion, I will be done. I told the boys I'd be home soon. So this one go to midnight too, Dad? God,
Would anyone care to make a motion? Marshall.
Yes, I'd move approval of the conditional use permit without conditions and direct staff to develop the relative criteria and standards for us to look at.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is unanimous. So we are done. And part of that motion was to have staff develop the relevant criteria. Okay.
I think assumed in that was consistent with the discussion by the board tonight, right? I assume.
Correct. Including any additional relevant criteria that needs to be addressed for an educational institution.
Is there any other board communication?
This, as far as the meeting date,
Setting a date for
Oh, yeah.
relevant criteria?
next Tuesday, a week from today.
And you can have them done within. I'm available.
Okay. We'd like to get everybody before the Labor Day weekend, ideally, so
Yeah.
Okay.
it works for
Tuesday
everybody on
works
the
good
board.
for me.
Tuesday here at 5:30.
5:30?
Oh, okay.
Does that give you time to get here?
Yeah, that's fine. I
Okay.
just was thinking 7 o'clock, but 5:30 is better.
All right. Any other business?
Move to adjourn.
I have a motion. I hear a second.
Second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you, everyone.